Hi, everyone. Welcome to this campfire session on the Outdoor Hospitality Industry Outlook Report brought to you by Ojai and Storable Newbook. We're going to let everybody filter in here, give it just about 30 seconds, and then we're going to get started with our webinar for the day. And our goal, just so that everybody has it, you can drop your questions in the chat as we go. We've got team member Riley Wilson with us, watching the chat, and we will do our best to leave some time at the end to get to the questions that are in the chat that we can't answer actually in the chat. We'll have some live time at the end. So let's get started. We got a lot to cover. So, and I want to make sure we have that time at the end. So let's get started. We've got the annual report that we put out. Ojai puts out every year the Outdoor Hospitality Industry Outlook Report that surveys the campground owner operator audience. It's brought to you by Storable Newbook, our great partners from them. And joining me today is Erin Stevenson, my good friend from Storable Newbook, VP Growth and Client Experience. Hey, Erin, how are you?
Hey David, good. Thanks for having us. Excited to
Of,
uh to dig a little deeper into the data today.
of course. It's good to see you.
Yeah, you too. You too. It's been a while.
It has. And it's early where you are. So we'll
It
thank
is.
you doubly for getting up so early to join us on the webinar.
Of course, it's 5 a.m. here down under in Australia. So throughout the presentation, you'll see the sun start to rise up behind me. So watch out for that as well.
Awesome. Erin is going to we're gonna have good conversation today around these data points because Erin has a wealth of knowledge coming not only from her experience at Storable New Book, but also just in the hospitality industry in general. And all of the data points that we're going to review today are just really, really top of mind data that we touch on every year, and we want to try to give you some good quality takeaways along with the data that you can use in your day-to-day business decisions. So we'll start with what we're going to review. We will be hitting some key topics, barriers to success being one of them, industry confidence, pricing, occupancy, booking trends, that sort of thing, infrastructure and amenity trends, along with some marketing and distribution trends. And before we like dive into the meat of the data that is encapsulated in these five areas, I want to kind of hit on some of the more demographic data around who responded to the survey. And the reason why this is so important is, if you're out there, if you're a campground who, let's say, I'm just going to pull a number off the slide here, if you're close to 105 sites, all types, this is an opportunity for you to look at the data that's coming out in this report as pretty apples to apples comparison to what your situation is, right? And if you're considerably higher or lower than that, that's okay. You can take the data and parse it to fit your particular park size, for example. The other thing to consider when you look at the full report is that the data is also separated out by region too. So you have the ability to look at data nationwide, but you also, which is what we're going to go over today, but you also have the ability to look at this data from your specific region perspective. And that's going to change, obviously, depending on the region. So important to, after we're done here, go on to the Ojai Resource Center as an Ojai member and download this full report for free and review it. And obviously, at the end, we'll pop up our emails too. So if you have questions about the report, you can reach out to us directly. Um, but the interesting thing about the demographic data to me was a couple of things. One is that there's a lot of room for expansion from the parks that responded, 71%. said that there's room at their park for expansion of some sort. And then the data point on the far right there is always interesting because there's always this relationship between us as the private campground RV park industry and the public side of things, right? That help drive people to our campgrounds, especially if you are near one of those areas of public land. And 74%, which is pretty in line with what it's been for the last few years, say that their park is within that 25-mile radius of some sort of public land that's driving people to camp. Um, so with that, before we dive into the next slide, Erin, what are your thoughts on the expansion piece specifically? What data should guide how that land is used from your perspective?
Yeah, I think this is such an exciting opportunity for the market. Like 71% of parks having an opportunity to expand is just huge. And so when you take a step back and think about that, I'd be looking at breaking it down into four types of buckets of data and just keeping it really simple. So if we think of it a bit like a quadrant, but at the center of it is just one question that you're trying to answer, and it's where am I getting the best return on their land? So I think first of all, having a look at their own data that they've got within their property management systems and speaking with their team as well. So in the systems that everybody are using, to manage bookings and everything, people just aren't going deep enough on it. And so if you are looking at expanding, I'd be looking at things such as, what's the revenue per site or per cabin with less maintenance and upgrade costs. Look at the length of stay by site type you already have existing within your property, and add that with occupancy by rate types and guest types as well. So, at a basic level, there you're asking, is two cabins actually outperforming maybe 10 powered sites within your park? So, I think if you can get that as a baseline and then kind of layer that in with behavior. So if you've got long stay guests and maybe work is staying 3 to 6 months, that drives a very different build at your park where you might be looking at, expanding to add in full kitchens and laundry services or more kind of livable spaces. But if it's a short stay transient type park that you're running, you don't need to overbuild. And maybe it's a simple kitchenette that might be enough to satisfy that next addition into your property. Another area that people often miss out on is actually looking at their wait lists or missed demand opportunities that they've had. And so this is where maybe you are a really busy park, you're a full park, but you've got opportunity to expand. Having a look at what people were actually trying to book that they couldn't book into because you were busy. And
Hmm.
talking to your team about that is actually really important. So I think first of all, like having a look at that data that you've got in your platform is number one. Second of all, having a look at that customer profile that you've got. Like at the end of the day, our customers are the reasons that we exist at all in business. And it's not one size fits all. If you're a park that's got younger travelers, they're more price sensitive. So they might need more of a tent and budget style option. The older guests might be leaning into comfort. So again, that question becomes, who's your core customer? Third on this as well, looking at local market and peers, this is where a lot of opportunity is missed. So looking at your competitors around you as well. What do they have on offer? What don't they have on offer? And if everyone's full on cabins and charging premium rates, then that's really a signal. Or if everyone's kind of discounting, that's also another signal that you should be looking at. So having a look at those kind of quadrants, things like rental growth matters because they change how people are arriving at your properties. And the US RV rental market is really pushing towards mid-size Class C vehicles. So typically 20 to 30 foot, easy to drive, easy to park. So all
Hmm.
of those wrapped up together really should be designing kind of what that space looks like and the access and kind of the layout. So just sanity check yourself. Are we selling out at peak periods? Are we talking to our staff, looking at data? What's the best return on value? And have you got the team to kind of support that growth as well? So I'd break it down, but kind of package it up and not just look at one particular data set there, David.
Yeah. Well, and you set up a lot really, really well there because as we get into the data in today's presentation, we're going to hit on a lot of the various points that you talked about there and be able to dig in a little deeper too. So thanks for recapping or kind of setting us up for success there. That's great. I'm going to go to the next slide, which continues in with kind of the park demographic piece and touches on something that you mentioned a minute ago, which is the staff that you have and tapping into their knowledge for what that expansion could look like, right? The typical park that responded has 3 to 6 employees. So there's not a lot of employees there, obviously, but those should be well tuned in employees into what's going on in the campground, right? It's
Yeah.
probably the owner operators are not included in these numbers, so it's a little bit higher with the owner operator who is on site. But the interesting thing here in my review of the data was that in order to get the best employees, campgrounds are saying they're having to pay over and above minimum wage right now. It's just the environment that we're in. 42% are saying that they had to pay above minimum wage. When we're talking about having to pay higher wages to attract staff, let's talk a little bit about what the strategies that you've seen working with campgrounds all over the country. What are some of the strategies that you've seen work in order to keep staff engaged and productive for the business?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you're exactly right. This is the same question we've had year on year, and we're consistently seeing that minimum wage
Yeah.
go more and more every year. And it's becoming a baseline now. It's not actually something different for our industry. So if you look at this, break it down to three things. And I'm really big on culture and empowerment and growth within my particular business at Newbook. But if you break down your business into three areas that you look at with your staff, so as I mentioned, culture, empowerment, and growth. So when we're looking at culture, you don't want team members that are just turning up to do their shift. You're paying them a higher wage, they're turning up, they're just checking people in, checking people out. You really want to get them making feel like they're a part of something, that they're going to stay with you, that you're giving them, clear communication and involving them into the actual business itself and recognizing them for the work that they do. So some of the best operators I've seen make it really practical for their staff. And they do things like set team challenges, set up a upsell, a goal for the month or a guest experience score goal, and they explain to their team what that means and what that impact has to their business. The more that you bring your staff into understanding the reasons of why you should focus on upsells or guest survey stores, really gets them to buy into what they're doing. And it also drives more revenue, but it most importantly creates a sense of urgency, a bit of competition, but it also gives them a chance to grow as well.
Drives
I think
retention too,
it so
right?
does.
More engaged staff is going to stick around for multiple seasons.
Correct, correct. And I think another area that we miss is around empowering our staff. The best parks that I've worked with really trust their teams to make decisions and remove friction from their day to day. So if your staff are buried in the admin, they get disengaged pretty fast. And if they have to continuously come to check with a senior leader or a manager, it just removes them from being empowered in their business. So the more that they can stay motivated and focused on the guest outcome, you'll actually find your staff more engaged. And then I think the biggest area that we miss as an industry as a whole across the globe is actually giving our team an opportunity for growth and upskilling. And a lot of us look at maybe our front desk receptionists or our front desk check-in team members as that's all they do. But there's actually a lot of growth that they can do as well. And I've been working with a couple of parks recently in the US market, and a lot of their staff are interested in AI. And yes, it's the hot topic across all industries right now, but giving them an opportunity to maybe open up an AI tool and run through your booking confirmations through AI to change the way that it's looking, feeling, or talking to customers. Just give them a sense of curiosity for them to be able to grow and help you adapt in your business. I think is really important as well. So, yes, people gets people in through those doors, but focusing on the culture, engaging them, empowering them to make decisions, and giving them some sort of development is really what I see works well.
The key is using AI in the right way.
Correct.
That's the key.
On the
And
topic.
it's in such an entry point in, especially in our industry right now, that I think a lot of people are um, scared of it in a way, right? They want to make sure we're in the people business, right? We're in the experience business. They want to make sure that whatever they're putting out feels like that human element has not been lost, right? Do you see that a lot? That
Yeah,
concern?
yeah, absolutely. And I think even without AI, we have automation. And automation is there. And I think we're gonna dive into this a little bit more around some of the tools in PMSs and what you should be looking at. But automation and AI doesn't mean that you lose that customer touch. It
Yeah.
actually, like, you can customize this so it gives that same look and feel and touch of a receptionist responding to a direct email as well. So it's the way that you treat it. It's the way that you set it up. It's the way that you invest time into that branding and the way that it opens up a message saying, hi, David, not just hi, General Park guest name. So it really is about the way that you spend time investing into setting it up for that customization that you don't even know.
Yeah. Yeah. And those automations that you're hinting at, we'll talk a little bit more later about that. To me, the key takeaway there is that if you've got 3 to 6 employees implementing that automation, it turns it into having 6 to 9 or 12 to 18 employees, depending on how much you're using it, right? It just takes more of the burden off of those employees to then be focusing on things that are more
Correct.
important, more valuable, more revenue driving, that kind of stuff for the park. So
Correct.
good, good points. Good points. The next slide here is hitting on those barriers to success that we mentioned earlier. And this, again, not too much different than last year's data. Staffing issues were number one again last year. And the difference though is that the number of people who responded staffing issues was up considerably. 15% last year versus 30% this year. So staffing is much more on people's minds than it was even last year when it was number one still. Um, the funding, financing, debt issues were up there as well as the state and local laws and regulations, which we'll touch on here in a minute as well. But um, the good news here was there is good news. The good news here was that fewer parks actually reported that they were going to have barriers, right? So that was a key win in the data, I think, too. What I'm really curious about here from your perspective, Aaron, is there are lots, like we talked about a minute ago, lots of automation things that can make the staffing part maybe less stressful, right? Once you've gotten that staff in the door, using those features to automate things that maybe weren't automatable even as soon as last year, last season, right? So, what are some of the most common manual tasks that you're seeing that people are automating that we can get people thinking about?
I don't know if anyone's going to be shocked here, but it is just general automation in itself. We still work with so many parks today that are still manually replying to a huge volume of general messages every day to their customers. So things like booking confirmations, they're not automated, like check-in instructions or FAQs or around amenities and pet fees and late arrivals. There are still so many parks that are manually sending that to every single guest, where I know a lot of the PMS platforms out there certainly have that automation built in. And again, I think it's that barrier that people are thinking they're going to lose that guest touch by turning on the automation, but it really isn't about that. So the better operators we're seeing are really layering up general automation around booking confirmations, check-in instructions, and so forth, but they're layering that with additional automated workflows on top of it. So, pre-arrival emails and texts with everything that the guest needs. So, don't just send a booking confirmation and then have a guest wait and then contact you and you're manually answering phone calls or emails on information that you know they're going to need. Set up some automation around a pre-arrival email that gives them everything they need. Or once they arrive, give them arrival instructions tailored to their specific booking type. So for an RV site, give them RV information. For a cabin, give them information on their cabin. I think another part that people are missing as well is sending the right messages at the right time. So a lot of people go and activate automation and they just turn it all on at once and they spam their guests. So again, thinking about at what point in time should I turn on that automation? And again, if they're staying longer than 5 nights, maybe tailor the experience a little bit differently from someone that's just coming in and staying 1 night. And the reason that that automation piece really matters is it isn't just efficiency, but that's part of this, staffing issue that we have. We're paying higher, we're struggling to keep people empowered and, culture efforts going in to keep them there. So if you can activate some automation, it'll get rid of those manual, mundane tasks, but it will keep your guests involved and up to date with everything that they need. So it's not one flashy feature, David. It's not one thing, but it is just
That's
having,
okay.
yeah, I think having a look at smart automation is certainly something we need to be doing.
Yeah, that's okay. And it gets back to what we were talking about earlier about the fear around AI and automations not being personal, right?
Right.
You can still have these things be personal. And the to use one of the examples that you gave, I mean, if someone is showing up at your campground in an RV, you don't need to spam them essentially with a whole bunch of information on cabins and tent sites and all that kind of stuff, right? You use the data that you know about your camper and you give them only the information that they need. There's a higher likelihood that they're actually going to read it too,
Exactly.
you know? Yeah. So, very well, very cool. The third data point there, the 12% on that say the barrier to success is local and state laws and regulations. That is one that OHI really focuses on every year. We are really looking specifically at what are the issues at the federal level, but also at the state and local level, where we can work with state associations to relieve that pressure, right? Relieve the regulations that are harming the industry, but then also promote the laws and regulations that would help our industry. And we had a great example in Wisconsin last month where we won a big issue there around personal property tax that's going to not only save campers but also campgrounds a lot of money. And at the federal level, we're working and have been on the credit card fee issue, where we have been working on getting more competition in the network processing industry to help save money on credit card fees. And the great news is the map that you're looking at here is that has started to filter down into the states, right? The states that you see highlighted here are states that are picking up similar legislation and running with it that we're working with our coalition at the national level to get that legislation passed in those states. Would love, if there are people on the webinar who are interested in learning more about this or and even going to DC with us. We have a fly-in coming up in early June that we would love to have more campgrounds there, to have that perspective to help tell your story. Um, the important part here from a perspective of data that we have at our campground, though, that I'm interested in hearing about, Erin, is that operators obviously they're actively managing all of the payment costs that go along with running a campground. Um, are they able to to do that effectively through whatever PMS or whatever tools that they have, or are there blind spots there, or are there features that can help them save money on these and manage these payment costs more effectively.
Yeah, I certainly think for most operators, payment costs is still a bit of a blind spot. And I was actually surprised when I saw the data come out that it was only $8,000 a year in fees on average per operator. I actually feel like it's a bit more. And the funny thing is, most campgrounds that we talk to think they're across it until they actually dig in a little bit deeper. So I think if you look at this, and if you could claw back even 2% of that, it's $1,600, which is a nice, long weekend away, or it's another, contractor marketing person to come in and help with your business. But the reality is, what looks like a flat rate on credit card fees generally isn't. You've got to look at premium cards, international cards, and different payment types, as they all behave differently, even when the
Yeah.
headline kind of looks really simple. And operators are generally just busy running their parks. And this is one of those things that do not often get reviewed. We've recently bought a new payments platform into our business, and we're helping we're helping campgrounds understand the existing fees that they've got. So, where we're finding the biggest difference is when campgrounds actually sit down and have a look at their statements over the past few months and break down to see where the extra fees are coming in because they're thinking they're getting a flat fee, but there's actually a whole bunch of hidden fees coming in behind that. And
Yeah.
so my word of advice to any operator out there is go and review the last 3 months and look at the true blended cost, not just the advertised rate that you've got. It really is a bit of a miss that people are doing. So I don't think people are ignoring it on purpose, David. It's just one of those areas that gets buried, but take time to zoom in because there is actually a lot of kind of win you can have there with a bit of margin recovery.
Yeah. Well, and it's really to your point, it's really challenging to look at, right? I mean, I've had campground owners come with us to DC who have shown me literally 11-page documents that is their bill outlining all of the fees and everything. Right. So the legislation that we're looking to pass at the national and state level will simplify that, right? It'll make it easier for us to review on a regular basis. But regardless, it has to be done, right? You can't ignore it for sure.
I think as well, lean into AI with this. If you can upload your
Yeah.
statements some sort of AI tool and prompt it with questions, tell me where are my hidden fees? How much am I being charged on fees? Let AI help you uncover that a little bit more. So yeah, certainly use that as a tool as well.
Yeah, for sure. All right, I'm going to go to the next slide here. We're going to talk a little bit about confidence in the industry. So 62% of respondents said that they expected to see increased profit margin. And last year, um, the number on the right there, the respondents this year said 10% of them said that they were not confident, which is actually up a little bit from last year by about 2%. The numbers, when you look at them year over year, are actually pretty similar, which in some cases, some ways makes sense because we're still in that, I think, flat recovery type market. But what we're seeing, the reasons being, is that the broader economic climate is a big driver. Uncertainty in the economic market, increased costs, which obviously is connected to that, and not a whole lot. There were about 10 to 13%, I think, was the number that said that they were seeing uh, decreases in reservations year over year. But I'm curious, you guys see aggregated data from all of the parks that use the Storable Newbook product. What's the data across those parks telling you guys? What are you seeing as the behavior that might support or maybe not support the
Yeah,
data that we're seeing here?
yeah, certainly taken a bit of a deeper dive on this because I found this particular part really interesting. I think it's safe to say that we're seeing enough data now to say that it's not just optimism, it is actually behavioral and change. So when I looked at Q1 2026 versus Q1 2025 across our network, the direction is very clear in that we have started very, very strong this year. But it's not just the volume that's heading up of bookings and what we're seeing, it's actually how guests are changing their behavior. And so, what we're seeing across our network of parks is that guests are becoming a little bit more value conscious, but not that it means that it's cheaper, but it's more about reliability and experiences that are really being lifted this year compared to last year. And so we've seen across our network online direct bookings through direct websites is up 71% year on year already. That's following a 231% increase in 2025 compared to 2024. So we're seeing really good traction for online bookings already. Um,
Hmm.
that is, and OTA and phone bookings are still growing alongside it as well. So it's not that we're seeing a channel shift, it's that we're seeing overall demand is strong on digital conversion right now as well. But what is actually really important here is that, yes, we're seeing higher profits, higher bookings come through. But as I mentioned, we're seeing clear patterns this year where a lot of the properties that we're working with are using their dynamic rates or their pricing structures differently. And I think people are growing, our market's growing, and we're starting to understand that there's different ways to use rates and so forth. So we are seeing dynamic rates help push up some of those profit margins and getting more bookings in. But we are seeing higher efforts for channel managers being connected this year. We're seeing higher growth in upsells and experiences as part of the staycations that people are having. So we've got a lot of confidence coming into the year. There's really high demand online. And as I said, we're starting to see that it's moving away from just booking a site or booking a cabin, and there's more re-engagement in market to increase upsells and opportunities around experience.
I love how when you did your thumbs up, it created a thought bubble on my end that had a thumbs up emoji. That's cool.
Or something.
Sometimes when you do something, fireworks show up too. It's great. Um, so I guess my follow-up question to that is, are there high performing clients out there that are doing anything different that other parks who are listening in or watching this recording can replicate easily?
Yeah, I think, look, the high performing parks have always done one thing really well and continue to do it. And it's they use their data in their PMS to their advantage. So they're shifting, they're changing, they're adapting based on previous bookings, people who have stayed, how long they've stayed, or looking at future bookings and the type of guests, the demographics, and what type of, stays they're having. So the high performing parks are really taking time to understand their business and invest time to change and manipulate the way that they go out to market. So I think if you're a park that's really wanting to grow revenue, you're wanting to change the way that you're currently working, you have to look at your data. And you've got to look at it weekly, monthly. You've got to look at what type of guests you've got coming in, what type of bookings you've got, and you've got to be able to change and adapt to suit the market needs you've got. So, yeah, I really believe that data is key to driving a high performance business because it allows you to adapt and shift to the market that you've got coming in at that point in time.
Yeah. Well, and part of that data that you're looking at obviously is demand data and what your pricing was last year versus what it should be this year to start off. And then obviously there's a whole conversation around dynamic pricing as things go up and down, ebb and flow, obviously, right? But when we look at pricing trend data that was coming in from this report, the typical increase from last year was 3%. The year before that, it was 5%. So people are maybe seeing a little bit of a market shift that's telling them maybe I shouldn't increase as much. But when you look at the parks that have increased their either nightly, weekly, or monthly rates, they're pretty flat compared to last year, right? We were hovering around 64% in both of those areas last year. So about the same number of people. The key here in my mind is how are you using the data that you have and the systems that you have to help drive those pricing decisions based on demand, right? It's based on what that data is telling you. So what are parks using in terms of, when it comes to like dynamic pricing tools, versus I know there are still parks out there who are setting pricing manually. I was even on a webinar a few weeks ago where a scary percentage said that they hadn't changed their pricing in 5 years. So there are parks out there that are doing that. The key is we need to in order to be successful, we need to be more focused on the data and what it's telling us when it comes to how to price, right?
100%. And, David, it blows my mind when I still walk into a new property or we get new people kind of onboarding with Newbook and we're looking at their rate structures. And you're right, they're holding a flat price all year, or they're not increasing year on year because they want to be
Hmm.
nice. So, I think there are a few things that you need to look at. You've got tools in your platform that can do dynamic pricing for you that will automatically adjust based on occupancy and not just your season. So having a look at the tools there that can certainly help do that for you so you don't have to manually think about that. I think as well, a lot of parks, they don't spend enough time understanding pricing structures, but also increasing pricing during compression periods instead of just holding flat. So if you've seen that last year, all of a sudden you've got a really peak period outside of summer or outside of, that autumn period where you may have a lot of guests coming in and you've got a particular weekend that held high for a reason, next year you should be looking at increasing that individual weekend as well.
Hmm.
Having a look at previous trends is really important to to look at what you're going to do for next year. Using minimum stays on peak weekends to protect your yield, and testing incremental changes is really important rather than going and doing crazy big jumps where you lose traction, you don't get your bookings coming through, and you lose that confidence. But I think the interesting part of all of this is that the guests in our industry are used to hotel behavior, or they're airlines where they are using that dynamic pricing kind of event planning schedule. So the expectation, sorry, is already there for them that that is what we should be doing in our market as well. So it's less about whether dynamic pricing works because we know that it does. We know for a fact it does in our industry, but it's more about the operator understanding their business and what their dynamic pricing structure can come up to and understanding the tools that they've got to look at occupancy, not just season and period types.
Yeah. And there's so many this year especially, there's so many special events going on in the US that help drive those special pricing market, right? The beyond the 250th anniversary, there's going to be people obviously camping around that. There's going to be people camping around the 100th anniversary of Route 66. If you're anywhere near Route 66, that's an opportunity. And then obviously we've got the World Cup coming to the US as well. So there's opportunities galore to look at special weekends to help drive more revenue.
And I think as well, there's a lot of people in our industry that have had their parks for a very, very long time. And so they've got connections with some of their guests. And so
Hmm.
before. I think, the biggest tip I can give you is that if you are one of those parks that are holding on price because it's a gut feel that I've got to do the right thing by that guest that's been coming for 10, 20 years, bump your pricing up. Bump your pricing up for the market. And if you've got that one guest that you want to reduce and give them a discount, give them a discount and earn additional revenue off everybody else that's coming in around them. So be smart with your business. Is yeah,
Although
bit
it's although it's real, I agree with you, but it's really possible that that person who's been with you for a long time is probably sitting in their RV saying to themselves, "Boy, they haven't raised my rates in quite a long time. That's unusual. Everybody else is raising their prices."
point as well. So yeah, I think get out. Our guests aren't going to not stay with you over $3. They might have a conversation with you and then you can decide what you want to do. But bump up that extra $3. You do that over 100 sites, you've just made a lot more revenue every year.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about camper experience. We hit on that briefly earlier. A lot of that has to do, obviously, with the money that is being put in back into the campground, right? We pulled from this. this year's report that 53% improved infrastructure, around that same number, improved or added amenities for their campers. Um, Pickleball was the number one amenity again, with 27% saying that they added pickleball to their campground. These are all things, obviously, that play into the camper experience when they show up, and the amount of fun that they're having and the experience that they're taking away. Um, Year over year, we asked these same questions. The one interesting thing was that the focus on improved added amenities specifically was way up. Last year, that number was 35%. The year before that, it was 28%. So there's obviously a drive in the market right now to going into this season to have improved or added some amenities that will drive user camper experience. So how can operators measure that ROI on whatever they've added in the off season? What are ways that their PMS can help determine whether that investment was worth it?
Yeah, for sure. And I think you've got to be smart here. If you've added a new shower block, for example, your PMS isn't going to help you on a return of investment apart from the amount of people that will come through that potentially could use your shower block. But let's use pickleball as an example. I think it's brilliant. And just an FYI, it's coming across major in Australia now. We have pickleball courts popping up everywhere, even in our park. So I'm excited to see it coming across here. But using pickleball as an example, often we see operators, they're managing bookings for the courts in a diary or on a bit of paper or on a whiteboard in their office. You should integrate that into your booking platform. And what you'll do by doing that, you're obviously capturing accurate data of how many people are using that court or how many people are hiring the rackets and the balls. But you also avoid double bookings and you can automate reminders. But that's where you gain the insight on your return of investment on whether that was the right investment for you. So your PMS should allow you to also control those booking rules around what time do you want people to be able to book for how long are they allowed to book. But there is also, the added benefit that they can go and book this online as part of their guest stays. So it increases that value perception of what they're going to get when they're booking with you. So I think if you've got a platform, a PMS that allows you to book out rentals or activities, adding it in, understanding what the spend and the cost was versus the maintenance and upkeep, and then how much you're either selling that for, renting it for, or hiring it for, is the way that you can use your PMS to add all those data points together. So set it up, have a look at your platform, and just make sure you
Yep.
track understanding, is this the right investment for us? And if not, maybe you need to pivot.
Yeah. And Brenna Stevens, who's on the webinar, dropped something in the chat while you were talking. Cornhole tournaments have been really successful at their campground. And I think Brenna, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong. You're in the Midwest, I think, but Indiana, if I remember correctly, but I may have that wrong. Oh, you're in Colorado. See, I had that wrong. Um, I think events like cornhole tournaments, pickleball, you mentioned it a second ago, pickleball's going all the way to Australia. I mean, these are things that are popular with people regardless really of where you are in the country or demographic or any of that kind of thing, right? So the more that you can use the data to drive decisions into what to improve or add in the case of pickleball, for example, it also helps you figure out the amount of revenue that you can bring in, right? And get creative with things like tournaments and whatnot. And you can track that kind of stuff in your PMS as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. Let's move to occupancy and booking behavior. The fun one from earlier we kind of hinted at earlier. We're seeing from the data in this report, the occupancy rate is up slightly from last year. Typical night stay is 3 nights, and about half are seeing bookings out about 2 months.
Mhm.
You obviously, like we have hit on before, you see data aggregated from all across the country. So I'm curious in terms of, how can segmentation inside of the system, the data that you're looking at, drive better decisions around what you're seeing in terms of occupancy and booking behavior. Obviously, there's pricing to be considered, there's marketing efforts to be considered, but how can owners segment that data to drive better decisions?
So I think number one rule of thumb, clean data in gives you clean data out. So you have to set up your property management system to ask the right questions and allow you to capture the right set of information. So,
Hmm.
for example, one of the questions that you could have as part of your booking process is what is the demographic of this customer? Are they a single person coming to stay, a family? Are they there for business? Having data insights that and capturing that clearly as part of your online booking process and your direct booking process will allow you to capture data that you can then segment to help you, pivot your marketing strategies or pivot your pricing strategies. So I think clean data in gives you clean data out, which allows you to make better decisions. So on the pricing side, segmentation really lets you match value to what the demand is. So for example, short stay, high turnover guests will tolerate a different pricing behavior than long-term guests within your property. Cabin guests typically have a higher willingness to pay for convenience and experience, where tent guests or RV camp, van guests are often a little bit more price sensitive. So making sure that you're capturing that information by what type of accommodation have they got, layered with the demographic of the people, will allow you to look at your pricing points that you should have for your business. But the one that you just mentioned, David, that a lot of people miss is actually this data should be used for your marketing strategy. And it's so interesting. We look at businesses and, about 2% of their overall strategy is spent on marketing, which is so, so low. So we
Yeah.
really focus on that as well. So, I think using that data point as well as we touched on before, instead of sending the same message to every single guest, tailor it. Look at the guests that you've got coming in, change that experience. And that's what we see with operators doing it really well, is they're using those key data points, setting up the right questions, and then taking a look to segment out.
Yeah. I went ahead and moved to the next slide because of something you said there, that you're seeing 2% marketing. The report showed 3%, which slightly higher, but still not as high as it should be, right? There's an argument to be made around just simple national averages. 3%, 2%, well below the national average. The typical small business right now is spending 7 to 10% on their marketing efforts to drive more revenue. So, that's a key piece of data coming out of this report in my mind is taking a look at what your spend is on marketing, because the COVID days are over where people are just coming out to camp. We have to get back into the marketing mindset to drive people to come to camp anywhere, right? And there's
Right.
there's the OTA element of that helps drive marketing, which we could talk about here. But the other interesting thing that's up on the screen right now is that almost, I mean, a good chunk, more than two-thirds
Mhm.
of the respondents said essentially, I need help with this. I don't exactly know what to do, right? But there are elements of a PMS, there's elements of OTAs, there's all sorts of things that can help drive that marketing for you, right? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And this is actually a topic I'm pretty passionate about, David. And I think I
I know
stand
you are. I know you are. That's why I kept it for last.
Yeah, every year I stand on stage and I talk about marketing, OTAs. And I think the interesting thing is, and something that I've got a bit of a global lens on, is the OTA strategy is actually part of your marketing strategy. And, from coming from Australia, working over here for the last 13 years, I feel like the American market is kind of sitting where Australia was about 5 to 6 years ago, where OTAs weren't necessarily part of our marketing arm in our businesses. And there was a shift in market that I think is now starting to come through in the US, and something that I really want to make clear for everyone as well. OTAs should not be your enemy. OTAs are basically a billboard effect for you. They give you the most distribution across any other platform to get your brand and your name in front of people across the world. And so looking at OTAs as actually an extension of the marketing arm for you is really important. Because if you have a look, they're not just searching one place, they're using multiple channels to kind of discover and compare. They're using AI now, and AI is continuously hitting your booking.coms, your Airbnbs, your Expedias for data. So if you're not on there, you're not using that as a marketing arm. And why that's important. It's important because it's going to give you visibility, it's going to give you growth. But the point that people miss is actually once a customer has booked through an OTA, that is now up to you to automate a direct marketing campaign to get them back booking direct. And so what I mean is, spend that 10% commission or 12% commission on a Expedia booking coming through for you, but invest in automation in your PMS for it to activate an email the minute they check out. Thank you so much for staying with us. Next time you stay, here's a 5% discount if you book directly with us. So it's really about connecting with that customer and getting them as a return guest to your particular website or calling through to you. So I think, I could spend hours talking about this, David, and I know we've got to come up to time, but think about an OTA as part of your marketing arm. Invest in your data, understand your data, and make sure that you're connecting with the right marketing strategies. And Bonnie, I just saw your chat come up saying, what does OTA stand for? That is a online travel agent. So think of booking.com, Expedia, Airbnb. They're those connections that will get your property out into market. My pleasure.
Those are those companies that are literally spending millions, hundreds of millions of dollars marketing for the entities that are on their sites, right? I mean, so you're taking advantage of their marketing dollars in exchange for a, when it comes down to it, pretty small fee,
Correct.
basically.
Correct.
Yeah.
And if we're Erin's RV park, booking.com and Expedia will always hit above Erin's little old RV park. So you're exactly right. They're spending the top dollars to make sure that they're number one prime position.
Yeah. I know this is your favorite section of what we talk about every year. So is there anything that we didn't talk about on these data points that you wanted to touch on? Did we cover everything?
Yeah, I think we did. I think, the biggest thing for me when I talk to campground owners is invest time in your business. Invest time in looking at your data, invest time in understanding what you can do to adapt and change. And if it's not turning on dynamic pricing for you, maybe that doesn't work. But maybe have a look at how you could do an upgrade promotion to extend their booking or to upsell them to something differently. So there's a whole bunch of strategies that you can look at. And if you're a little bit lost or you're a little bit confused in business, there are so many people across our industry that you can talk to at conference, that you can hire to spend a few hours with you to teach you through, pricing strategies, what ADR is, things to look at within your business. So just don't feel that you're alone and make sure that you're connecting, at conferences, with people, understanding what you can do next. I just think spend more time on your business is my biggest key takeaway for you for today.
I don't know if you saw it in the chat or not, but Desiree dropped an interesting fact in there too that I think's worth mentioning. The billboard effect, basically, of being on those OTAs, but the large number of people who are going to come book with you direct anyway, right?
Correct.
Even from the get-go. Just by seeing you, they're doing their research, they're seeing you on those sites, and then they come and they drop in to your site or to your PMS and book directly. It's a win-win. Let's see, Brianna, how do we get more involved with Ojai? Wow, how do you want to get involved with Ojai? We'd love to have you more involved and engaged. If it's advocacy wise, I'm going to drop my email in the chat here. If it's advocacy or anything, really, shoot me an email. Let's have a conversation. But there are so many ways to get engaged with the Ojai community. I can't even, it's a whole webinar in itself, basically. So we'd love to have you more involved. Um, so let me drop to the takeaways here, and then we'll kind of close us out and go to Q&A. But wanted to just kind of recap a little bit in terms of what we've learned from today's webinar, what we're taking away. Confidence is pretty strong in going into the summer season, but there's obviously pressures rising, like labor costs. Cost management is obviously very critical. There are growth opportunities that we talked about, like expansion and amenities and how to drive more revenue that way, and marketing that we just talked about being a top priority, should be a top priority anyway. Erin, to close us out, what will, in your opinion, separate the top performing parks from the rest out there over not only this season, but the next 2, 3 years?
Yeah, I think a line that's always stuck with me is it's not insight that we lack, it's actually the action. And I get it. It can feel really overwhelming, but if we can flip that, it can also be really fun. Our guests are changing. The next generation is growing up with technology and AI as second nature to them as well. And so their expectations are going to shift over the next 3 to 5 years. So I think as an industry, standing still just isn't an option. We're not alone. There's, a lot of people, as I said, that will help build with you, that will help share ideas and really build momentum. And there's, as I mentioned before, there's a lot that you've heard today, and you don't need to do it all. So my key takeaway for a really high performing operator, it's finding one thing to do. Find one thing to do every month to perform on your business rather than working in your business. I think is where you're really going to stay connected and where you're really going to grow. I think, at Newbook, if I look back at our business and how we operate, we have a simple mindset and it's one more. So that's one more customer call that we could do before we leave. It's one more improvement, one more slight insight that we could give someone is actually going to create better motion and better movement. So small actions done consistently absolutely will add up over time and will really shift and pivot your business as well. And whether you're with Newbook or not, and you're wanting advice or insights into anything that we've talked about today, or, as you've heard, I've got a global lens. This is something I'm very passionate about, not just Newbook, but the industry as a whole. If you want any further information or you want to chat about something you're thinking about implementing in your park, again, not Newbook related, feel free to drop me a line as well. I'll drop my email in the chat. But yeah, certainly here to help. But just one thing every month, and you will be better by the end of the year.
I love the fact that you use the phrase "work on your business" instead of "in your business," because that was the theme at Ojai Connect this last about a month ago, and it was very well received. I think there were a lot of people who hadn't really taken time to think about that strategy, even as simple as it is. Um, one thing before we leave, Jenny. Hey, Jenny, how are you? My Ohio buddy. Um, Dropped in the chat, evaluate the season for camping in your geographical location to add shoulder season rates spring and fall, and not just limit to in season and off season rates. That's a great tip.
Yeah.
Anything you want to add on that, Erin, before we wrap?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Evaluate your seasons, evaluate your business, and just start to pivot based on what you've seen in trends previously and upcoming. I think you've called it there. You've done well.
You, I see, dropped your email in the chat. I will do mine as well in there in case anyone has any questions for either one of us. Please feel free to reach out. Erin, I want to thank you again for a great webinar. This is always one of my favorites every year, and you're always fun to work with. Thanks so much for being here today, and thanks to Storable Newbook for sponsoring the research. It's so important for our industry. We really appreciate your partnership.
Of course, you as well, David. Thank you, everyone. Great to see you all today.
Thanks, everybody. This webinar will be it's recorded too, and will be sent out afterwards as well. So be on the lookout for that. And you can download the full report that we talked about through the Resource Center on ohi.org. Just log in as a member, and you'll be able to download it for free as a benefit of membership.
Great.
So thanks again, Erin.
Thanks so
See you
much.
soon. Bye bye.
Bye.